Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss any update from Rouse IAS Study Circle. Join the only official Telegram channel of Rouse IAS Study Circle to get the relevant materials and important updates. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, the what, why, and how of the newspaper analysis. So today we are going to discuss the Hindu Daily edition dated 27th November 2021. The topics to be discussed has been displayed on your screen and the timestamping of the same has been provided in the description box below. Before starting today's discussion, we have an announcement for you. Rouse IAS is conducting the pre-parikshan, which is an all-India free mock test on this weekend, that is 26th November to 28th November. This is a real simulation of the actual prelims examination and will be very helpful for you to analyze your current level of preparation and devise a strategy to clear the prelims examination 2022. In this regard, we are also providing you the scholarships for General Studies Integrated Quality Improvement Program, which will be a year-long program and will be providing you the current affair classes on every weekend and also the dedicated classes for prelims as well as the mains examination. This also includes the test series from the prelims as well as the mains point of view. So what are you waiting for? Register on the eLearn platform, appear for the test and get top ranks to get these scholarships in GSI QIP program. So our first topic is related to COVID-19. By now you must be aware about this news which has made headlines in almost all the major newspapers as well as news debates. A new variant of COVID virus has been found which is named as Omicron. So the context of this news is that recently WHO has classified B.1.1529 variant detected in South Africa as a SARS-CoV-2 variant of concern, saying it may spread more quickly than other forms. So in certain African countries as well as European countries, this new variant of COVID-19 has created a lot of hue and cry, and that is why all the major countries including India is keeping a tight watch on the spread of this variant. Now from the examination point of view, this topic is relevant under two sections. One is the preliminary examination whereby we have a micro section of general science, and also in mains examination general studies paper 2 having a section of issues relating to development and management of social sector services relating to health. So under this topic we will learn that what do we mean exactly by the variant of concern, how the viruses are classified, and which is the dedicated body to look into these matters. So let us move towards a detailed discussion about this topic. So first thing is that there is a dedicated body in WHO which is known as the Technical Advisory Group, TAG, Virus Evolution, VE. So TAGVE, which is an independent group of experts that periodically monitors and evaluates the evolution of SARS-CoV-2 and assesses if specific mutations and combination of mutations alter the behavior of the virus. As we know that all the viruses, including this one, change over time. However, most of the changes have little or no impact on the virus properties, but some changes may affect the virus properties in terms of its easiness in spreading, the intensity of the disease severity, the performance of the vaccines, therapeutic medicines, diagnostic tools, and other public health and social measures. So which means that despite the fact that all viruses change over time, it is not necessary that it may lead to huge alteration in properties. But yes, there are certain changes which can change the properties to a huge extent. And this novel coronavirus is known to mutate very frequently, and that is why in 2020 WHO came up with two important classifications. According to 2020 characterization, there are two categories. The first one is the variant of interest, that is VOIs, and the other one is the variant of concerns, that is VOCs. Now, variant of interest means that if the viruses mutate to such an extent that there are changes in genetic makers which can lead to reduced neutralization by antibodies, they are termed as variant of interests. This only means that the scientific community will be interested in studying those variants, and it is predicted that there might be an increase in transmissibility. However, on the other hand, in the variant of concerns, the viruses have the evidence of increased transmissibility. Now, this is the major difference. In the variant of interest, it is predicted that the transmissibility might increase, but in the variant of concerns, there are evidences of increasing transmissibility, and in terms of intensity or severity, the variant of concerns are more severe diseases. So this means that variant of concerns have all the parameters of the variant of interest in addition to the other parameters which have changed or made the viruses more severe. So that is why VOC are more severe as compared to VOIs. And that is why it requires public health actions at national as well as international level. And this virus has been called as the variant of concern, which is of utmost importance. Another important fact about this virus is that WHO has said that the present PCR diagnostics continue to detect this variant. This means that presently we do not require any other type of test to detect these variants. The PCR test is sufficient to detect this. And in line with this, WHO has provided certain guidelines for the countries. There are three major guidelines that what countries should do. First, they should enhance the surveillance and sequencing efforts to better understand the CoV2 variants. Second, they should submit complete genome sequences to a publicly available database such as GISAID. And third is that they report initial cases or clusters associated with VOC infection to WHO. And as we all know that the responsibilities do not lie only on the shoulders of the government, we as individuals also share certain responsibilities. And that is why individuals are reminded to take measure to reduce their risk of COVID-19, including proven public health and social measures such as wearing the well-fitted masks, hand hygiene, physical distancing, improving ventilation of indoor spaces, avoiding the crowded spaces and getting vaccinated. Now, if we go by the previous year question in prelims paper which was asked in UPSC 2015, you will come to know that such type of viruses or news related to such viruses are important from the examination perspective. Because in 2015, UPSC asked this question: among the following which were frequently mentioned in the news for the outbreak of Ebola virus recently? So similarly, there might be a question related to this novel coronavirus or the variant which is known as Omicron. So now summing up this topic in brief once again. This Omicron is a new variant of the novel coronavirus which has been detected in South Africa, and WHO has called it as a variant of concern. We have a dedicated body known as TAGVE, which is an independent group of experts to monitor the changes in the physiology or the mutations of various viruses. And as we all know that viruses by nature mutate and change their characteristics, and so is the case with novel coronavirus. According to 2020 characterization, these novel coronaviruses are classified into two major categories, that is the variant of interest and variant of concerns. The variant of interest are lesser in degree of severity as compared to variant of concerns, because here it is predicted that there might be an increase in transmissibility, but in the variant of concerns there is an evidence of increased transmissibility, and that is why it requires public health actions at national as well as international level. And WHO recommends that countries should take proactive steps in order to contain such type of viruses by enhancing the surveillance and sequencing efforts, focusing on genome sequencing and sharing the information at publicly available database, and reporting such incidents to the WHO. And at the individual level, it is our responsibility to follow the social distancing measures, improving our hygiene, and focusing on the ventilation of the indoor spaces. Moving on to our next topic, which has appeared on page number 11. And this is in relation to the recent poverty related data which has been released by Niti Aayog. So the context of this news is that Niti Aayog in its multi-dimensional poverty index has said that more than 50% of the population in Bihar is identified as multi-dimensionally poor, and this state has the maximum percentage of population living in poverty among all the states and union territories combined. This topic falls under the UPSC scheme of syllabus under General Studies Paper 2 and the subsection of issues relating to poverty and hunger. And such news are also important from the prelims point of view because the questions might be asked in the similar fashion as it was asked in UPSC 2015. The question asked was Atal Innovation Mission is set up under which of the following bodies? So similarly, there might be a question that in India multidimensional poverty index is released by which of the following bodies? Now we need to analyze the indicators of multidimensional poverty index. That what do we exactly understand by the concept of multidimensional poverty? You understand this by a simple imagination. For example, if I ask you that according to you, who is a poor? If you are basing the poverty estimates only on the income levels, that will be the narrow understanding of the concept of poverty. For example, if you say, let's suppose that a person who is earning, let's say, rupees 1000 a month is above poverty line, and the person who is earning below rupees 1000 a month is below poverty line. But the thing is that it might happen that the person who is above poverty line, for example, who is earning, let's say, 1500 rupees per month, he might be giving a lot of rental bills because of which his saving might reduce. But on the other hand, the person who is in the BPL category and suppose he is earning only 900 rupees per month, he might be living in his own home. And that is why he or she might not be giving the rents, which in turn will increase his or her savings. So now I ask you same question that according to you, who is more poor? And this is just one of the indicators, that is the home. There might be other parameters also. For example, the person who is earning more than 1000 a month might be living in such areas where there is no internet connectivity, or he is paying a lot of electricity bills, or he is not getting proper education or health. His standard of living is not at par with the person who is getting just 900 rupees per month. So that is why you need to acknowledge this fact that poverty is not a restricted concept in terms of income only. It has a broader dimensions, and that is why UNDP, that is United Nations Development Program, came up with this idea that poverty needs to be measured in the multidimensional concept. And therefore it identified three broad criteria to measure the multidimensional poverty. And those criteria are health, education, and standard of living. And further, these three criteria are subdivided into 10 indicators. And the important point is that India's national MPI model retains these 10 indicators of the global MPI model. That is, Niti Aayog's multidimensional poverty index is in line with the UNDP's MPI, that is multidimensional poverty index. Now we will have a rough estimate of these indicators, that what do they tell us. First and the foremost important thing is that the weight given to all these three indicators are same. That is, 1/3 proportion is given to health, and 1/3 to education, and 1/3 to the standard of living. But inside these indicators, there are several other parameters also. For example, under health, we have two major things. One is related to the nutrition, and the other is related to the child mortality. And the person will be deprived or will be called poor if they are living in the households where any adult under 70 years of age or any child for whom there is nutritional information is undernourished. And similarly, in case of child mortality, we will call a person deprived if any child under the age of 18 years has died in the family in the 5-year period preceding the survey. And similarly, in education, there are two criteria, that is average years of schooling and the school attendance. Because these two parameters are different. A person might be in school, let's say, for around 10 years, but if his or her school attendance is not regular and continuous, we can imagine the impacts on his or her learning outcomes. So that is why not just the years of schoolings are important, but the continuous regular attendance in schools are also important. And similarly, in standard of living, we have criteria like cooking fuel, sanitation, drinking water, electricity, housing, and the other assets. Now the important point is that whenever you encounter a question in prelims or especially in the mains relating to poverty, do not restrict yourself only to the narrow dimensions of economy, and that to just the income level. If you are asked to suggest steps which Government of India should take in order to tackle the poverty challenges in India, along with the steps to increase the income of the people, you must also suggest the steps which are focusing on the education, health, sanitation, cooking fuel, drinking water, electricity, housing, and assets, etc. Because this will signify to the examiner that yes, you better know and understand the multidimensional concept of poverty. Now, if we come to India in context of the recently released MPI by the Niti Aayog, we have certain factual information, the worst performing states and the best performing states. Under the worst performing states, as we have discussed in the context, that Bihar is the worst performing state with highest percentage share of population, that is more than 50%, approximately around 52%, considered as multidimensionally poor. Bihar is followed by Jharkhand, then Uttar Pradesh, then Madhya Pradesh, and then Meghalaya. And similarly, the best performing state is Kerala, followed by Puducherry, Lakshadweep, Goa, and Sikkim. So, summing up the entire topic in brief once again. The topic has appeared in the context of recently released Multidimensional Poverty Index by Niti Aayog, where it has claimed that Bihar is the worst performing state when it comes to multidimensional poverty indicators of the population. And here we learned that the MPI index of the Niti Aayog is in line with the MPI index of UNDP, which is further based on 10 indicators and 3 broad classifications related to health, education, and standard of living. All these 3 things are divided equally, having a weightage of 1 by 3 each. However, the sub indicators differ in weight. And in the end, we came to the factual information about the worst and the best performing states as per the recently released MPI by Niti Aayog.
This article on page number 12 talks about the issue of creation of national courts of appeal. And in this regard, the Attorney General of India, Venugopal, has pushed for the creation of national courts of appeal. And this idea has been mooted in the backdrop of increasing pendency of cases in the Supreme Court. And in order to reduce the pendency of cases at the Supreme Court level, it has been argued that there should be 4 national courts of appeal with 15 judges each. And this is likely to drastically reduce the pendency of the cases at the Supreme Court level. However, there are various issues associated with this particular issue, and let us try and understand these issues in detail. That is, what are the arguments against the creation of the national courts of appeal, and what are the issues with such arguments. And this forms a very important part for us from General Studies Paper 2 point of view in the topic Constitution and Polity. Further, the pendency of the cases is also a very big issue as far as the Indian judiciary's functioning is concerned, because it is said that justice delayed is justice denied. And that is why this is another issue that we need to look at. So first, what we will do is that we will understand the nature of national courts of appeal and what are the various associated issues with this. After that, we will revise from a previous DNS video the various issues associated with the pendency of the cases, how this pendency can be reduced, and what are some of the suggestions that have been forwarded in this regard. Now, to understand the issue of national courts of appeal, first we need to understand what is the strength of the Supreme Court of India. In this regard, it has been argued that although the strength of the Supreme Court of India has been increasing continuously, but the amount of work or the number of cases that the Supreme Court is dealing with is increasing exponentially. And this has led to a huge amount of pendency of the cases at the Supreme Court level. Now, if you look at the strength of the Supreme Court judges under the Indian Constitution, originally the Supreme Court was to be comprised of 8 judges under the Indian Constitution, and it included a Chief Justice and 7 other judges. However, the Parliament has been empowered by the Constitution to increase the strength of the judges, and accordingly, Parliament has from time to time increased the number of judges in the Supreme Court. As such, in 2019, the strength of the Supreme Court was increased to 34, including the Chief Justice of India. And presently, there are around 33 judges, which include the Chief Justice of India. However, despite this increase in the strength of the judges, the work of the Supreme Court has expanded exponentially. Now, if you look at the jurisdiction that has been provided to the Supreme Court of India, various provisions have been provided in the Indian Constitution. And some of these jurisdictions of the Supreme Court include the writ jurisdiction, the original jurisdiction, as well as advisory jurisdiction and the appellate jurisdiction. And it is because of the appellate jurisdiction, that is, all the cases that are going for appeal from the High Court into the Supreme Court, they now constitute the large number of cases that are pending in the Supreme Court. And as such, the number of appeals in the Supreme Court under the appellate jurisdiction has increased substantially as compared to the constitutional cases, which should be the primary focus of the Apex Court of India. And this has led to an increase independency of the cases in the Indian judiciary. If you look at this example from 2014, various benches of the Supreme Court delivered around 888 final judgments. However, the number of constitutional matters that were dealt with in these judgments was only 64. This means that majority of the judgments that were provided by the Supreme Court in the 2014 were related to the appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, or it had decided on various appeals from the High Courts of India. In this regard, it is sometimes argued that the character of the Supreme Court of India seems to have transformed from a constitutional authority or a constitutional court to that of an appellate court. This is because the Supreme Court, besides the constitutional cases, is also occupied with the cases of appeals from the lower courts. However, when we look at the apex courts of different countries, in many countries the apex courts restrict their hearings to a limited number of cases only, and they rarely hear cases related to civil or criminal matters. And because of this, in India, such a wide jurisdiction of the Supreme Court has resulted in a significant backlog of cases at the apex courts level. Now, as a solution to reduce the pendency of the cases at the Supreme Court level, it has been argued that national courts of appeals should be created. And in today's news article, the Attorney General of India has suggested that 4 such national courts of appeal should be created as a solution to reduce the pendency of the cases at the Supreme Court level. Also, this will improve the focus of the Supreme Court on issues that are constitutional in nature or are of national importance. And these national courts of appeal will handle the cases of appeals from the high courts. So that will be their specific jurisdiction that will be provided to these national courts of appeal. Further, we note that in India, Supreme Court only has one bench at Delhi, and these national courts of appeal will be spread out across India, and presently the suggestion is that 4 such courts should be created for different parts of India. And such national courts of appeal will be intermediary courts between the high courts and the Supreme Court, and they will relieve the Supreme Court of the routine or the appellate cases. And this would let the Supreme Court to function as a constitutional court to deal with the matters of national importance, fundamental rights, and issues involving a substantial question of law. However, this idea of National Court of Appeal is still in a formative stage, and various issues have been associated with the creation of such National Court of Appeal, and various arguments have been forwarded against the creation of such a National Court of Appeal. And one such argument is that if you look at the pendency of the cases in the Indian judiciary, more than 2 crore cases are pending in the lower courts. And as compared to that, more than 50,000 cases are only pending at the Supreme Court level. And it is argued by these experts that the lower judiciary needs to be equipped to provide speedy, timely, and effective justice. And it has been argued that by doing this, it will result in substantial reduction in the need to approach the Supreme Court. However, if you look at the issues with such argument, it is that with the number of cases that are pending in the lower judiciary, it will take several decades to clear the current backlog of cases. Plus, questions have been raised regarding the efficiency or efficacy of the judgments that have been provided by the lower courts. And many times, these cases end up at the highest level of courts where the appeals are exhausted ultimately. And even if the lower judiciary is equipped, the Supreme Court will still continue to be the final court of appeal. And as such, its role as a constitutional court will further be diluted. So this is the argument that you should empower the lower judiciary. However, this is the counter argument that despite empowering the lower judiciary, the Supreme Court will still remain the final court of appeal. And that does not solve the purpose of improving the focus of the Supreme Court on the issues of constitutional nature or issues of national importance. And also, it is not likely that the pendency of the cases will be reduced drastically immediately in the near future. Another argument that has been forwarded against the creation of the National Court of Appeal is that the Article 130 of the Constitution provides that the Supreme Court shall sit in Delhi or in such other places as the Chief Justice of India with the approval of the President from time to time appoints. So this is the provision of the Article 130 which provides for Supreme Court having its bench in Delhi, and also how the Chief Justice of India in consultation with the or approval of the President can expand the number of benches of the Supreme Court. That is, it can increase the geographical spread of the Supreme Court. So the argument is that an amendment of the Article 130 of the Constitution will amount to a change in the basic constitutional framework of the Supreme Court itself. and hence such kind of constitutional amendment can be challenged in the Supreme Court itself. However, if you look at the reports of the Law Commission, which clearly highlights the flaws in this particular argument that has been forwarded against the creation of the national courts. So, the Law Commission has said that if the Article 130 is liberally interpreted, no constitutional amendment may be required for the purpose of setting up of the benches in 4 regions and a constitutional bench at Delhi. This is because already the Chief Justice of India is empowered to create more number of benches with the President's approval. Further, if such liberal interpretation of the Article 130 is not possible, in that case, a suitable legislation or constitutional amendment may be enacted to do the needful. But it is a need of the hour that such national courts of appeal should be created with a specific jurisdiction of handling the appeals from the high courts. Then another argument against the creation of the national court is that setting up of such regional benches of the Supreme Court would dilute the apex court's authority. However, the counter argument here is that if the regional benches are indeed set up, they would only have functional role in as far as the appeals from the high courts are concerned. That is, their jurisdictions will be limited. That is, they will only handle the appeals from the high courts. So in that case, it will not reduce the powers or authority of the Supreme Court, because even then the authority of the Supreme Court will remain. And even with the creation of these regional benches, all the constitutional as well as issues of national importance will be continued to be dealt with the bench that is created at the Delhi. That will be the apex bench that will be at the Delhi. And the Article 130 itself makes it evident that the framers of the Constitution did not want to restrict the geographical ambit of the Supreme Court to Delhi only. And that is why in the Article 130 it has been provided that the Chief Justice of India, with the approval of the President, can increase the number of benches of the Supreme Court beyond Delhi. So these are some of the arguments against the creation of the National Court of Appeals, and these are some of the issues that are associated with these arguments. This takes us to the revision of the issue of pendency of cases in the Indian judiciary. Let us revise from a previous DNS video this particular issue. And both these issues are extremely important for us from the mains examination perspective. Now, looking at the status of judicial backlog, according to the National Judicial Data Grid, in 2018, there were around 2.93 crore cases that were pending in the subordinate courts. 49 lakh cases are pending in high courts and 57,987 cases are pending in Supreme Court respectively. So this shows that huge number of cases are pending across India. In Supreme Court, more than 30% of the pending cases are more than 5 years old, while in Allahabad High Court, 15% of the appeals have been pending since 1980s itself. A Law Commission report of 2009 had quoted that it would require 464 years to clear the arrears with the present strength of judges. So look at these numbers and they highlight a very grim situation as far as the judicial system of India is concerned and the kind of backlog that we witness in Indian judicial system. Then this brings us to the next question as to what are the reasons for such high judicial pendency in India. First and foremost reason that has been highlighted is the shortage of judges in India. And around 5,580 or about 25% of the posts are lying empty at the subordinate courts level. Further, the judges to population ratio is also poor in India, and India has only 20 judges per million population. Earlier, Law Commission had recommended that there should be a judges to population ratio of about 50 judges per million. Second reason for judicial pendency is frequent adjournments, and the laid down procedure of allowing a maximum of 3 adjournments per case is not followed in over 50% of the matters that are being heard by the courts, and this leads to rising pendency of the cases. That is, courts itself are not taking into consideration the time limit that has been set out in the procedure for allowing a maximum of 3 adjournments per case. Then there is low budgetary allocation, which leads to poor infrastructure of the judicial system. India spends about only 0.09% of its GDP to maintain the judicial infrastructure. And the infrastructure of the lower courts of the country is miserably grim, due to which they fail to deliver quality judgments. A 2016 report published by Supreme Court showed that existing infrastructure could accommodate only 15,540 judicial officers against the All India sanctioned strength of 21,000 judicial officers. So this shows that the allocation of GDP is also poor regarding the judicial infrastructure in India. Another reason for increasing pendency is that the burden of government cases in the judiciary itself is very high. And the central and the state governments are responsible for over 46% of the pending cases in the Indian courts. That is, the central and the state government themselves are the leading litigants in the Indian courts. Then the issue of special leave petition case in Supreme Court currently comprises about 40% of the court's pendency, and these eventually leads to reduced time for cases related to constitutional issues. Then there is issue of judges vacation. Supreme Court works on an average for only 188 days a year, while the rules of Supreme Court specify minimum of 225 days of work. That is, even the highest court of India is not working efficiently. Then there is lack of court management systems, and courts have created dedicated posts for court managers to help improve court operations, optimize case movement and judicial time. However, only few courts have filled up such posts so far. Then there is inefficient investigation, and police are quite often handicapped in undertaking effective investigation because of lack of modern and scientific tools to collect the evidences. And then there has been increasing literacy rates in India, and because of this, people are becoming aware of their rights and the obligation of the state towards them. And accordingly, this population section approaches the court more frequently in case of any violation of their rights. Accordingly, India needs to improve its judicial capacity to entertain such kinds of litigations. Now, what is the impact of such kind of judicial pendency in India? So it is said that justice delayed is justice denied, and timely disposal of cases is essential to maintain rule of law and provide access to the justice. Speedy trial is a part of right to life and liberty, which is guaranteed under the Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, and that is why justice should not be delayed. Second is that judicial pendency erodes social infrastructure. That is, a weak judiciary has a negative effect on social development, and it leads to lower per capita income, higher poverty rates, poor public infrastructure, and higher crime rates, which is detrimental to the overall development of the country. Then there is issue of overcrowding of the prisons, and already the prison infrastructure is very deficient in India. And the overcrowding of prisons also results in violation of the human rights of the prisoners. Further, such kind of pendency affects economy of the country, as it was estimated that judicial delays cost India around 1.5% of its GDP. And according to the Economic Survey of 2017 and 18, pendency hampers dispute resolution, contract enforcement, it discourages investments, it stalls projects, and hampers tax collection and escalates legal costs. And this leads to increasing cost of doing business and is also detrimental to the ease of doing business, which India is increasingly trying to achieve. Now, what are the steps that are required to reduce pendency in India? First and foremost is the improvement in infrastructure for quality justice. And accordingly, a parliamentary standing committee has said that the state should provide suitable land for construction of court buildings, etc., and it should undertake vertical construction in the light of shortage of land. Timeline should be set out for computerization of all the courts, and necessary steps should be taken towards setting up of e-courts in India. Then also the courts or the system should address the issue of vacancies in the courts. And Supreme Court and High Court should appoint efficient and experienced judges as ad hoc judges in accordance with the Constitution of India to deal with the matter of pendency. Then proposal has also been forwarded for All India Judicial Services, which would benefit the subordinate judiciary by increasing the quality of judges and will also help in reducing the pendency. Also, it has been recommended that there should be increase in the number of working days of the court. And average annual working days for subordinate courts is 244, 190 for Supreme Court and 232 for High Court. An increase in number of working days could improve productivity significantly. Then it has also been recommended that there is a need for definite time frame to dispose the cases by setting up annual targets and action plans for the subordinate judiciary and the high courts. And the judicial officers could be issued a strict code of conduct to ensure that the duties are adequately performed by the officials. Further, there is a need for better court management system and reliable data collection. For this, categorization of the cases on the basis of urgency and priority along with bunching of the cases should be done. Economic Survey of 2018 and 19 has suggested formation of Indian courts and tribunal services to provide administrative support functions needed by the judiciary and identify the process inefficiencies and advise the judiciary on legal reforms. There is also a need for use of information technology solutions, and there should be use of technology for tackling and monitoring cases and also in providing relevant information to make the justice litigant friendly. Further, there is a need for improving the alternate dispute resolution. And in this regard, it has been said that the Legal Services Authority should undertake pre litigation mediation so that the inflow of cases into courts can be regulated. That is, even before the case is filed in the courts, there should be a provision of mediation so that the cases are finalized even before they enter the courts. Then the Lok Adalat should be organized regularly for settling civil and family matters. Further, Gram Nyayalayas can play an effective role in managing small claim disputes from rural areas. And finally, it has been recommended that the village legal care and support center can also be established by high courts to work at grassroots level to make the state litigation friendly. So these are some of the issues related to the pendency in the Indian judicial system and also the delay in the justice. So these are some of the reasons, impacts, and these are some of the suggestions. And all the points that we have discussed here were pretty simple and straightforward, and they should be learned and can be used in writing answers related to delay in the justice system of India.
Now moving to the lead article which has appeared on page number 8. The article is in context of the recent findings of the National Family Health Survey 5, which has come up with several important findings with respect to children, old age, women, and different sections of society. Now, these findings are very much relevant from the policy formulation point of view and also from the examination point of view in preliminary examination as well as mains examination. Now, this topic has already been covered in detail in the DNS of 25th November 2021. So here we are taking this topic as just a reference because all the relevant dimensions have been covered earlier. For example, the DNS talked about the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, which is responsible for the release of this survey. And it talked extensively about the 131 indicators which are being involved under this survey. And then it also correlated with the earlier survey that was National Family Health Survey 4. And the major aspects which it covered were in the context of demography, infant and child mortality, nutritional status of children, women health and empowerment. So the link to the DNS of 25th November will also be provided in the description box, and you are requested to go back to that DNS to understand multiple dimensions associated with the recent findings of the National Family Health Survey 5. Now is the time for the question of the day. The question asked on 26 November 21, that is yesterday, was which of the following countries are not the members of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, that is SCO. So as we know that SCO has 8 members in total, and India and Pakistan were the new entrants in 2017. So correct answer out of these options is option D, Iran. The question for today is Omicron, a recent SARS-CoV-2 variant seen in news, was first reported in which country? Option A is South Africa, Kenya, Egypt or Libya.